In the first reading today, we hear from the prophet Isaiah talking about this desire that God has, that He will draw all nations, all peoples, all languages to Himself. And in fact, then we also hear in that reading about how God will send people out to do that drawing in, and bringing people in under one roof. And this can certainly, Jesus refers to this as well in the gospel, this idea of all people being drawn in. And we can certainly see this as a reference to the end of time, of course, where God will gather all people to Himself for the final judgment. But we also have the church fathers from the very beginning have also seen these references, have seen these biblical passages referring as well to the church. And if you think about it, there's not one country, there's not one nation or nationality or language that has not been drawn in to the Catholic Church. And of course then as well, that means then that biblical passage is also encouraging us to go out and be people who draw more people in. It's not like it says once you have every nation and language checked off the list, we stop. Because there are always people who are outside the fold, so to speak, who maybe have never heard of Christ or who have but have rejected Him. And our call, we're asked by God and in fact commanded by God to be those people who go out and try to draw more people in. And that call has been typically referred to, it might be a word that you have heard before. The word would be to evangelize. And evangelium is Greek for gospel. So the call that we've been given by Christ and the church is to go out and gospelize the world. And it doesn't say like if you're good at it or if you feel called. It's a call that all of us have been given to gospelize the world. And there are, I think, a couple of two hurdles that I'd like to mention that keep us in our own culture, that are particular challenges to us here in Brazil, Indiana, in the United States, that are problems or difficulties that prevent us from doing what Christ commands, which is to gospelize the world, to draw more people under the umbrella of the church. And the first is that we oftentimes are concerned that if we go out from here and we talk to people about Jesus and His church, that people will think we are creeps or that we are weird, and that they will run in the opposite direction. When I am out on the town or at the YMCA, for example, or wherever, if I go up and talk to people and say, hey, can I talk to you about Jesus? Or can I talk to you about the Catholic Church? Some people, we are concerned, those people will run as far away as possible. And that's actually a good thing for us to be understanding. Because if you think about it, God works in that same way. I think that we aren't necessarily asked by God to go out and just start yelling at people or talking to people or just walking up to everyone that we see and saying, hey, can I talk to you about Jesus and the Catholic Church? Because if you think about it, God doesn't do that all the time. God does not necessarily approach us with a full-on frontal assault. St. John of the Cross talks about people who are spiritually blind or essentially spiritually deaf, who are so wallowing in their sins and so blind to God's grace and love, that if God shone His full light on them, if He gave everything that He had showed, revealed Himself completely to those people, they would die. In fact, we read in the Old Testament that Moses goes up Mount Sinai, has a one-on-one encounter with God in a dialogue, and then when he comes down, the people can't even look at Moses, who's simply the reflection or the afterglow of looking at God. When we are in such a sinful state, it's almost like the light is too bright. And so for a lot of us, God does not come at us full-on frontal assault. What He does is instead, because we build all of these walls to keep God out, God instead, kind of like a thief, patrols those walls of our heart that we have set up, looking for ways to sneak past our defenses, to sneak past the walls that we have put up. And so our awareness that going out from here and talking to people directly one-on-one to their face about Jesus Christ and His church, our concern about that is a good one. And instead, I think what we have to do is be like God. Do the same thing that God does with us. That's how we have to go out and gospelize the world. We have to do it shrewdly. Christ says in the gospel, be innocent as doves, but shrewd as serpents. How can I get past the defenses that my loved one or my coworker or my classmate or whatever it may be, how can I get to their heart without scaring them off? It's the same question God asks about us. How can I get past the barriers that they have set up to get to their heart? Now, we have a caution here, though, as well. Because when we do that, we can very quickly move from sitting back and watching and asking and praying and being patient and saying, how can I get past those defenses that that person has set up? I can very quickly move from that to not doing anything ever. People sometimes would say, well, I've been looking for the right moment to talk to my mother about Christ, or in a way that she can hear it, for 25 years. That's too long. If we've done that, then I think we've shifted into more of being afraid and not actually doing anything. We need to constantly be looking for ways to get in, and we have to make sure that we don't simply move to that phase where we have given up completely and are saying, well, maybe sometime in the next 50 years, maybe 20 years from now, or maybe next year or next month. No, God is constantly testing the walls, constantly looking for ways into our heart, and we have to do that same thing with our family, our friends, our coworkers, the people that we are the only opportunity that they may have to ever hear about the gospel. That's strategy or hurdle number one. Our fear that we will be rejected, or that we will be the people, that we will turn people off. The second concern I think that we have, or the second hurdle that we have to gospelizing the world around us, is I think a fear that we will offend people, especially people who do not share our Catholic faith. We are concerned that we will offend them and turn them off. And we oftentimes have that fear because we don't understand exactly what the Catholic Church teaches on this topic. The Second Vatican Council and other councils and other places in the Church, and John Paul II and Pope Benedict, etc., have reminded us of a simple thing. People who share our Christian faith but are not Catholic, they still have, in some ways, means of being a part of our Catholic Church, even though they don't know it. Through especially the sacrament of baptism, we believe that in order to be saved, one is baptized, and yet other Christian faiths share baptism with us. And so when somebody comes to join the Catholic Church from the Baptist faith, for example, we don't redo the baptism. We don't redo the baptism. And so we oftentimes believe that what we're supposed to say as good Catholics is to go out from here and tell people, hi, if you don't join the Catholic Church, you're going to burn in hell. And so very rightly, we don't do that. We're just like, well, I'm not going to say that. That's just going to make people mad. And you're right. What we have to do instead, and this totally changes things, when we recognize that it's not necessarily about me going out and telling people that they're going to go to hell, but instead, what we have to believe is that in this place, in this church, in the Catholic, underneath the Catholic tent, the person that you love and care about will find the fullness of happiness, will find the fullness of joy, will find the fullness of peace. And if I believe that, then that changes everything. Because now I'm not going out there trying to thump people over the head and keep them from burning in hell. My motivation for going out from here and gospelizing the world is to want what's best for all the people that I claim to love. I don't want people under the Catholic Church, under the tent of the Catholic Church, for anything other than I know and have to believe that this is where they're going to find what they're looking for, to the fullest. What they may be finding in shadow form or in partial form in other places and in other faiths, we do have to believe as Catholics that this is the fullness and that this is where they're going to be at peace the most. And so if I can overcome that hurdle and recognize what the church really teaches, then that makes it a lot easier to go out from here and to look for ways to get to people's hearts and invite them here. Invite them under the tent of the Catholic Church. May we overcome the fear of creeping people out. May we overcome the fear that we will offend people of other faiths. And may we instead listen and watch and observe what God says and how God changes hearts. And may we heed the call that we have been given to go out and gospelize our world.